Okay, welcome back to devlog number 2 for the still untitled Game Maker Hockey Simulation. Trying something different this time, pre-recording the voiceover, so you're probably watching some B-roll of me programming or playing the game or something in the background. So first off, I'm sorry that it's been about 2.5 months since the first episode. I have been working on the game, I just never got around to writing another devlog. A little behind the scenes info, but my wife is a teacher, so when summer comes around, since I work almost the opposite schedule of her, I take most of my vacation time so that we can spend a bunch of time together. Although I called episode 1 an introduction, I realized afterwards that I didn't really explain the setting behind my game for anyone who isn't as familiar with the history of ice hockey as I am. So let me set the scene. James Creighton is generally given credit for organizing the first ice hockey game as we would know it in 1875, although that was pitting 9 men per side against each other from Victoria Skating Club versus boys from McGill University. The Western Pennsylvania Hockey League first began paying their players in 1901. The National Hockey Association, which was the forerunner to today's NHL, was founded in 1909. By 1915, the Pacific Coast Hockey Association had teams in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington. So it's in this time period that I wanted to set my game, where you have many small leagues around the country, and they're all competing, rising and falling, and struggling to survive. So let's see what changes I've made since June. Let's start with the small stuff. There's now an aging curve, so players grow naturally from age 18 to 21, then from 22 to 33, it's based on a die roll, and after that they begin to fall off. There's retirement logic, taking into account a guy's age and his overall skill. So players won't retire if they're still at the top of their game, but they won't hang on once they're not worth signing anymore either. And that's only run for free agents over the age of 35 right now, although every contract is a 1-year contract right now, so everyone's a free agent at the end of the season. I also improved some of the sorting logic, just stuff like when sorting by wins, a goalie with 0 wins should show up before a player who hasn't played in goal at all. I slightly improved the assistant coach's report, adding more lines of text that can show up and adding text for player archetypes, which is how I hope to create and then sort all players in the future. As a reminder, right now, players are just generated with 1 offense, defense, and goaltending rating. I'd like to make that more detailed in the future, maybe 3 sub-ratings each for offense, defense, physical, and goaltending. Another little fix was the negotiation page. Right now, it just looks like the player's details page once the player accepts his contract. It bugged me that you would sign a guy and then his stats would disappear, and then you would have to back out and go back to your own lineup to see his stats again. The big thing, though, is that I added a second league. I'm calling it the National Ice Hockey League, or NIHL by default, but that's the equivalent of the real-world NHA or NHL. So 4 teams are created when you start a new game. Each one has lineups filled with players who are better than anyone you can sign. Related to that, there's now a league page where you can see each league in the game and its prestige. Of course, right now there's nothing you can do to improve or diminish your prestige level, but I think you can see the idea. If you sign better players, it'll improve your league score, or maybe after the playoffs, we'll have an all-star series between you and the NIHL, and if your team wins, then it'll improve your score, or something like that. The game now has decision pop-ups. Right now, there's only 1. A player can ask for leave to go tend the farm or something, and if you say yes, he'll be unavailable for a couple days. It's sort of like an injury, but you get to choose whether he goes or not. Now, why would you choose to let him go? Because now the players have moods, and denying it will worsen his mood. It used to be that every player had a mood, but only during contract negotiations. And then once he was signed, it was just deleted. But now that we track this, I can, when I eventually get around to rewriting the actual game sim, make his mood affect his play. that ties back to choice events because I would like to have more. Like, for example, maybe one player isn't getting along with his teammate, and you'll have to play them separately or get rid of one or something like that. I want to eventually lean more into the feeling that you're one of the founding members of this league. So I want to use this choice framework for other team stuff, like teams want to vote on the change of rules for next season, or they want to admit a new team, or stuff like that. But with all that being said, most of the work I've been doing has almost entirely been in the background in the data itself. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to have multiple leagues in the game. Well, remember that the game started out as a modern NHL-style sim, where you are in the top league and there are no competitors. So I didn't exactly plan ahead for multiple leagues to be in the game. So in order to add more leagues, I had to split the data up for each league. That's team info, including their names, colors, rosters, league standings, pretty much everything in the game. And once I did that, I had to change a ton of code within objects, scripts, functions, rooms, etc., because nothing was in the same place anymore. So that took a ton of work going through everything in the game, piece by piece. I think I've fixed everything now, but I'll admit I haven't yet simulated multiple years within a single save, so I probably still have more work to do making sure I didn't miss anything. Relatedly, I also decided to restructure the data while I was at it. Back when I started making this game, I was also learning how to use GameMaker itself, so when I initially set up the data that I would need to track across this fairly complicated game, I relied almost entirely on arrays. Because arrays don't change the order of the data unless you choose to edit them, of course, that was the only way I knew to pack a bunch of data into one container and be able to access it and find it whenever I needed. So if I wanted to draw the name of a team, I knew the order of the global team list, and if I knew it when UID, then city, name, then mascot name, I could just set a string to Team List 01, Team List 02. The lineups especially were bad because each spot in the lineup was an array within an array. I originally set it up that way because I had the idea that you would have depth charts. When someone gets injured, the computer would just look at the next player in the list and readjust the lineup for you. That never got implemented, but the data structure stayed that way. So that meant if you wanted to access the center of the player team's lineup, for example, it was global.rosters 0 for the team, 1 for the center, and then 0 for the first or hopefully only guy. So you can see that if I had to add leagues to that, it would be rosters 0, 0, 1, 0, which is even worse. Luckily, when you use constructors to create custom objects, as I did for the players, you have to define named variables. So if I needed the goalie's last name, I could say rosters 050.last. Otherwise, it would have been something like global.rosters 00502, and that obviously would be a bit much. Now, that was a long time ago. So since then, I learned more about structs, which make code much easier to both read and write, because you can use dot accessors. When combined with the simplification of the lineup, for example, I could now say rosters1.team0.lineup5.last in order to find the last name of the goalie in Team 0 in League 1. It's maybe technically longer by pure character count, but it's much easier to understand, especially if you don't have the order of every array memorized. Alright, so I think that about wraps it up for episode 2 of the devlog. I've already got more stuff going into the game that I didn't feature in this episode, and I'm giving some serious thought to actually coming up with a name, believe it or not. If I ever hope on having people play it, I suppose it's good if they have a way to find it. So I'm going to get back to work, and I'll see you next time.